Welcome. If you're still taking a seat, there's plenty of seats down here in the front that are not taken yet, so you're welcome to grab a seat down there. My name is Dr. Jelena Oxley, and I direct the Jackson Family Center for Ethics and Values. So on behalf of the center, welcome. Thank you for all coming out for our first event of the semester. We're really excited to be back in Johnson Auditorium. Last year it was on the renovation list, so it was closed, and now we've opened back up, and look how beautiful it is. It's been renovated. You got fancy seats and everything. So we're really excited to have you here today. So let me just tell you a little bit about how things are going to go today. So the Jackson Center likes to bring up current and relevant issues that are of importance to everybody. College students, families, kids, adults, the community, no matter what role in life you're playing. We like to look at the ethical issues and just learn about what we could try to do better for solving some of our problems, whatever they are. So I'm really excited to introduce to you today my friend Erin Hall. And Erin is going to be talking to us about fast fashion. And when I was thinking about this event, I'm not going to lie, I've had students ask me for several years to have an event about fashion, and I didn't know who to ask, and then I was like, oh, I know exactly who to ask. So Erin and I have known each other for about 10 years, I think, something like that. Our kids are kind of close in age together, and she's an incredible designer. We're really, really lucky to have her here in Horry County. So her work has been featured in QuiltCon magazine, and Pioneer Woman magazine, and Reclaim Woman magazine. She's had a wide range of careers. When I first met her, she was managing, I think, a thrift store, or she owned a vintage clothing store. Both, yes, doing both. And then now she's transitioned and is creating her own soft goods. I think we're going to have some examples of some of these things. And sells them on Etsy and other platforms under the name of Asa Lady. So she'll be telling us more about that. She's really interested in sustainable and responsible fashion with an emphasis on natural fabrics, which she wants to be produced in the southeastern United States. I don't know about y'all, but when I was thinking about coming today, I was like, my first question was, what am I gonna wear? Were y'all thinking the same thing? I was thinking, what am I gonna wear? So I picked out this lovely dress, which is from the thrift store. Yeah, see, right? Look what you can get for $6 at the Carolina Forest thrift store. So I was very excited because Erin and I share a lot of common values about how to approach fashion, and I learned from her, and we're also going to learn today about this industry and what we can do better. And for all the folks who are, again, trickling in, there's plenty of seats down here at the front, so come on in. This side is sparsely populated, so there's some more seats over here. And at this point, I'm going to ask us to give a warm welcome to Erin Hall.
Hi there, I'm Erin. I will say I spend most of my time alone in a home studio making clothes, and I don't interact with this many people ever. So I am going to be a little bit nervous to start, but then once I get going and talking, I'll be more comfortable. But just bear with me. I'm Erin. I like to call myself a maker because that's what I do. But really I make a lot of things. But my favorite thing to make is clothing. I currently make a line of outerwear out of upcycled materials. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about upcycling. It's really a popular thing these days. I use quilts and turn them into coats. So I'm a quilt coat maker. I make a lot of other soft goods as well with upcycled materials. I'm currently working on a sustainable women's clothing line that will be manufactured in the United States. I love clothes. I love talking about clothes. I love designing clothes. I love making clothes. I love seeing what people are wearing. I love seeing why they're wearing it. I love style. But unfortunately today we're not here to talk about anything I love. We're talking about something that I hate, and that's fast fashion. Who here thinks they're currently wearing fast fashion? All right, what do you have on?
Me?
Yeah.
We were talking about this, but I realized that I'm wearing Shein. I have a nose ring and from Shein, and also
That's risky.
I know. And I'm broke, so what can I do?
Yeah.
And I'm also wearing a skirt from Target, and we were researching, and Target is fast fashion.
Yeah, who else? What do you have?
Walmart. And Adidas.
And what?
Adidas.
Yeah.
And Old Navy.
And Old Navy. All right, anybody else got any other brands on? Yeah?
Crocs.
Crocs?
And do you call them
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah, she's there. So I'm not wearing fast fashion today because I made this myself. And this is really where fashion started, is at home. Before the Industrial Revolution, most clothing was made in the homes by the people that wore them or by hired or enslaved help that made the clothes for them. Tailors and dressmakers worked out of their homes making clothes, mainly for merchants that they would give those clothes to based on the piece and sometime under contract. In 1811, the government issued a report that found that 2/3 of all garments worn by inhabitants of the US were homemade. The Industrial Revolution then brought us factories, and factories made clothing manufacturing faster, easier, and cheaper. These clothes could be shipped easily, which improved transportation and became more desirable at an attractive price. So until the 1960s, clothing shopping wasn't really a popular hobby to have. You shop for special occasions, when the seasons changed, maybe you needed a new coat, maybe you outgrew what you wore, maybe you wore out those clothes. In the 60s and 70s, we really start seeing fashion becoming a form of personal expression. And then we enter the 80s and 90s, and mall culture is alive and well in our communities. Shopping centers and malls really became the center points in communities for young people and families where they gathered to eat, hang out, and shop. The stores in the malls and shopping centers really recognized this uptick in business quickly, and clothing companies started to adjust their business model when they realized that people were not just shopping for back to school, they were coming there every other week, right? So the clothes became cheaper, the trend cycles increased, and shopping really started to become a mainstream hobby. Throughout this time also, from the 60s to the 90s, another separate thing is happening in the United States. Factories are moving, clothing factories, where they're manufacturing clothes. And factories had already been moving. Factories first started in major metropolitan cities, namely in New York, in Manhattan. That was the largest hub of production. This small area presented a problem, though, for the industry, and that was that unions that represented those garment workers that worked in those factories were able to really keep an eye on the conditions within the factories. In the 1920s, we get motorized trucks, and this allows materials to be moved through bridges and tunnels across the East and Hudson rivers. And now shops start opening it up across the river. And this gives, and this really drives lower costs, lower wages, because there's more women who are willing to work for cheaper in New Jersey and in Brooklyn. In World War II, after World War II and the New Deal, the factories started expanding. Now they have faster trucks and better roads, and shops are being moved farther and farther away from the Manhattan hub, and they're all around New England. At this point, we start to see a more standardized production system. My watch will also like to speak today. At this point, we start to see a more standardized production system. In the manufacturing of nicer women's clothing, one woman would perform all of that making at the sewing machine in the factory. So basically, all of the materials get cut out, they get placed next to her in the factory, and she sews that entire garment start to finish on the sewing machine in front of her. And then it gets passed on to a hand sewer who's probably sitting beside her and finishes the hem, adds the buttons, add any kind of like hand embellishment that might go on that garment. And these were considered skilled workers. So when we see standardized products start to come out, which would be like lower priced dresses and coats, these started to be able to be made by section work. And section work is basically when we think of like the modern factory line, right? One worker sits at the machine and only sews on lapels all day, only sews on pockets all day. This is unskilled work, which means that we can pay them way less than we're paying the skilled worker that would know how to sew a garment from start to finish. So those workers they didn't need to have that knowledge. And New York banned that work. New York was like immediately like, no section work here, but we're only having skilled laborers. And what that meant is that the factories skeeted right on out of town. They were like, no, we're not gonna be here anymore, we're not gonna pay these prices. In the 60s, a new highway system opened up that traveled from the north to the south. There's no unions in the South. We have right-to-work states, and there was an abundant supply of cheap female labor. And so quickly in the South, in the 1980s, we became the leader in apparel manufacturing. So this whole time they've been chasing cheaper labor, right? They've chased it out of New York City into New England, and now they've chased it all the way down south. And in the 1980s, they're paying garment workers a little over $3 an hour. Like, that's it. But they're still chasing more lower cost workers. So when the factories moved, they did this not just for cheaper labor, but for better tax benefits. Besides corporate tax incentives that we kind of know about today, one of the things we still see fashion brands doing, and let's take Shein for example. Shein only operates online on an app. So that means that you, the customer, are the importer of that product. Shein pays no taxes to the United States to ship that product here. And that goes for up to for about $800 worth of goods. So you can order, if you order 801, then Shein might have to pay some import tax or tariffs, but currently they're not. Overseas, they also have access to cheaper raw materials, more favorable labor regulations, for companies obviously, not for the workers, and less stringent environmental policies. Companies can now save millions by offshoring manufacturing. Just a decade later, in the 1990s, the first fast fashion retailer arrives in the United States. Her name is Zara. And the New York Times coins the phrase fast fashion to describe Zara's mission for a garment to go from the design stage to being sold in stores in under 2 weeks. In today's world, we're no longer just talking about Zara, H&M, Forever 21, or their other counterparts. Fast fashion is now considered any low price but stylish clothes that moves quickly from the design phase to the retail market. So who are these clothes for? Who are they making all this for? They're for bargain shoppers, right? Cheap clothes fit into everybody's budget. They're for trend seekers, seeking of the moment stylish look that doesn't break the bank. They're for one-time occasions, right? Everybody's gone out and bought that one dress for that one event that you wanted to go to. They're for convenience. Nearly every piece of clothing in our modern big brand stores today is fast fashion. 97% of all of the clothing sold in US stores right now is manufactured overseas. So the key to cheaper clothes is cheaper production. So how are clothes made? Has anyone here ever made a garment start to finish? What'd you make?
I've made 2 prom dresses and like a jacket.
Amazing. So what do you start with first?
Cereal, bread,
Before that?
a pattern.
An idea, right? So first up is a design, an idea. That might be a sketch. You might look at another person's dress and say, I want that dress, but I want it to have shorter sleeves and a longer hem. In America, clothing designers are paid about $75 to $150 an hour. After you've done the design, that design gets turned into a prototype or a muslin, and this is made by a seamstress. Seamstresses in America are making about $15 to $30 an hour. And basically what they're doing is they're taking your idea and they're sewing it into a prototype. What I'm wearing right now is a prototype that I made for one of my designs. From this prototype, it gets sent and made into a pattern, right? We make sure the muslin's perfect, the muslin, oh, I skipped a whole phase, didn't I? I skipped from prototype to muslin, and I didn't even explain it. All right, so muslin, this is a prototype. When you send off for a muslin, it's gonna be made out of plain cotton twill, basically. And it's gonna be like your same dress that you've imagined, but you're gonna get to mark it up, say like, oh, I want it to fit on the bust to be a little bit better, I want the hem to be a little bit shorter, and you're gonna keep working that muslin process until that muslin is perfect. Then that muslin moves to a pattern maker. Pattern makers basically make all the little pieces that make up all of your clothes. So every section that you have a seam, that's one piece of a pattern. Pattern makers earn about $65 to $125 an hour, or patterns can be sold in sets by pattern makers. Those patterns, these days are digitalized. They also, a lot of smaller factories still make physical patterns that are made out of tag board and oak board. After that pattern's made, you are gonna get a sample. And this sample, you're normally gonna have made by the factory you wanna work with. And this is a way to test and see, like, how good of a job does the factory do? Can they make this thing that I wanna make? How much is it gonna cost? How long does it take to make them? And the sample's gonna be made out of your final materials and your trims. So before we get to the production, which is what happens after that sample is perfect. In fast fashion, all of those above steps, so all those things I just talked about, they all happen in-house. And that means that Zara has all of that happening in one room at their headquarters. Traditionally, fashion houses design for 4 seasons. So high fashion, slow fashion, small fashion is doing 4 seasons, right? They're doing fall, winter, spring, summer, resort, and pre-fall. Fast fashion designers have started cutting corners and changing the fashion calendar. So they've gone from 4 seasons to 52, with many fast fashion brands now launching 50 to 100 micro seasons annually. Shein, maker of the nose stud, popular Chinese brand, pushes it even farther, and they release 10,000 items a month on their website. Many fast fashion retailers are offering hundreds of thousands of styles at a time. So how can they do this? Like, who can create 10,000 designs a month? Is there a designer capable of this? And the answer is no. They steal them. They steal the designs, they copy the designs, they borrow the designs, they make knockoffs of the designs. Doc Martens, Levi's, Ralph Lauren have all sued fast fashion brands. Most of these lawsuits get settled out of court. Indie small designers have long been finding knockoffs or dupes of their designs on fast fashion retailers. These smaller designers don't have the money to fight it out in court, and they're often left figuring out how to sell their own original designs when the fast fashion company is now selling their design made of cheaper materials for basically pennies on the dollar. Most of these small companies, when I talk about that, are made up of single women just like me, right? A woman who's making something in her home, or maybe she's launching a very small brand. She doesn't have a lot of financial backing behind her to go out and fight Shein for copying her, silk tank top. Another way fast fashion companies cut corners is by changing the design and production schedule. This is complicated, but it's important, and you'll start to see it now when you go into stores after I start explaining. So traditionally, retailers commit 6 months to the designs for 60% of their seasonal lines. So every year, a traditional retailer is going, okay, I'm planning for pre-fall, right? I have 20 designs that I want to make. So traditional retailers are planning ahead for 60% of those. By the start of the season, they're committing 80% of that season's inventory to production. This means you're in production on those items, and those are the items you're going to sell for the season. So this can be tricky, because it means you've picked the colors, the fabrics, the designs, and you have to sell that season. If you're wrong on these choices and say no one's buying like blue velvet leggings, then your choice is you're left with the inventory, or you have to do steep markdowns. Fast fashion companies have moved around this model. They're only doing about 15% of their designs 6 months out, with the rest of the manufacturing being done in the middle of the seasons. So have you ever noticed that you can now go into a store and there's always something new, right? They can do this by hopping on quick trends, shipping smaller batches more frequently, so they consistently are filling that void of clothes. If their blue velvet leggings don't sell, it's okay, because they have another batch of different clothes coming right in after them. Forever 21 is famous for this and is known for having new items to hit the floor every single day. A good way to tell if you are shopping fast fashion is to see how big the sales section is. If the sales section takes up a large section of the store, then that brand doesn't care about fashion forecasting. They're just willing to sell you whatever you're willing to buy, basically. And sometimes when we talked about anthropology. When I think about anthropology, you think it's like wholesome, right? Like they also make free people. When I think about free people, I'm like, that's the girl I want to be, right? Like everybody wants to be that free people girl. She looks so cool. And then you go into anthropology and that sales section is packed with tons of stuff. And I'm like, man, it is fast fashion. So speaking of blue velvet, is anyone wearing the blue velvet leggings right now? Besides cutting corners in the design phase, fast fashion can offer even lower prices because of the lowered cost of raw materials and using synthetic fabrics. So velvet used to be made out of silk. Now it's mostly polyester. The move from natural fibers to synthetics not only cut costs, but it cut quality, and it's made lasting impacts on our environment. In the early 2000s, when H&M first opened in New York, polyester overtook cotton as the most in-demand fiber. Polyester is derived from petroleum, air, and water. It's a thermoplastic. The process it takes to make polyester is the most chemical waste made by any textile manufacturing. Polyester makes the worst waste, basically. Currently, just the dyeing and treatment of garments, so you know when you buy something, it's like stone washed, or it has like a garment washed feel to it. That's considered, they do that in-house in manufacturing. That currently makes up for about 20% of all industrial water pollution. So polyester also costs half as much as cotton. And the use of synthetics has more than doubled since 2000 and is already present in over 2/3 of the textiles we use today. It's projected that by 2030, 3/4 of our textiles will be made from synthetic fibers, and about 85% of them will be polyester. So we've got our designs that we stole, right? We've got some cheap raw materials that are polluting the earth, so now we gotta go and get some cheap clothes made, right? So who's gonna make them? So you would think that we live in modern times, we have a machine for everything, right? You think there's probably a machine out there that can just make these clothes. Some of our clothes are made by machines. There's knitting machines that make a lot of our knitwear. A lot of our athletic wear, like if you have a pair of seamless leggings, those are made on a machine that basically knits some big tubes. Athletic sport shirts are made pretty much the same way. Everything else, your t-shirt, your dress, your shorts, your hat, everything else is made by a human being, sitting on a sewing machine, sewing. And I'm talking cutting the fabric. There are some cutting machines out there. If it's a really good factory and they have some money, there are cutting machines. But everything else is done by hand. Sewing it, ironing it, finishing it, packaging it. And it seems like this would be the most expensive step, right? Like we value handmade things. We love it when something's handcrafted. But you have to remember we're overseas now, right? We've taken this manufacturing overseas. We don't even want to pay them $3 anymore, right? So most fast fashion now is made in developing Asian countries. And 4 out of every 5 of these workers are women. In India, there's 45 million garment workers making about $180 a month. There's supposedly 15 million in China, making between $160 and $350 a month. And in Bangladesh, there's 4 million people making $100 a month as a garment worker. 93% of brands aren't paying garment workers a living wage. This leads to a lot of workers working overtime just to make ends meet. Overseas manufacturing means less stringent safety regulations for workers and exposure to harmful and unsafe work conditions. The fashion law in 2021 inspected over 1,100 factories used by Western brands and found 80,000 safety-related problems, including 20 factories in Bangladesh that were literally on the verge of collapsing. 110 of them had major structural issues. In China, some workers are working 18-hour days, which is a single day off per month, and they're paid just 4 cents per garment that they make. And that's if they make that garment well. If you screw up that garment, you miss a stitch, you do it poorly, you don't get paid for that garment. It goes back through the production line, you're docked the 4 cents, somebody else gets paid the 4 cents to remake it. The garment and textile industry currently employs about 75 million people worldwide. That's 1% of the world's population. 75% of those workers are women. The industry produces 80 to 150 billion new garments a year. The clothes are cheaply made, leading to lower quality, poor construction and fit. They're made of cheap materials that don't hold well to washing or wearing, and the workers are paid next to nothing to produce them. Currently, people are only wearing items of clothing 7 to 10 times before they get rid of them. And that's down about 35% in the last 15 years. So what do we do with these clothes, right? How many of us I currently have 2 trash bags full of clothing sitting in my hallway at the house right now. So what do we do with them? The first thing we normally do with clothes is we return them, right? They don't fit, it's not right for my event, I don't like it, the clothes don't fit right, so when I looked at the size chart, I had to order 2 to make sure that I was gonna get one that did fit. So most of the items we return to retailers end up in the landfill because it costs more money for them to recirculate those goods through their inventory system than it does for them to just throw them away. Interestingly, people with higher incomes generate about 76% more fabric waste, clothing waste per year. They have more money, they're buying more things, they're going more places, they have more expendable income, and then they're not wearing them very often. We see a lot of take-back programs, right? Have you ever been into like Nike, Madewell, H&M, the North Face, and they want you to like bring back your clothes that you bought from them so that they give you like 10% off and they're telling you they're going to recycle it? Like we've seen this, there's one at H&M right now. 16 out of 21 of those items from take-back programs are either destroyed, left in warehouses, or exported to Africa, where up to half of used clothes is shredded and dumped. So the next option that we normally do, we're gonna donate it, right? Like we're gonna take it to Goodwill once we get it out of the car or out of the house. So the issue with cheap clothes is they don't hold a resale value, right? Like who's gonna rebuy Shein at Goodwill when a shirt at Shein is $4.89, but the Shein shirt originally was like $4, right? You can't resell fast fashion. Thrift stores are overwhelmed with them. I'm a long-time thrifter. I love thrift shopping. I love vintage clothes. Like Jill said, I used to own a vintage clothing store. Thrift stores now suck. Like, it's just filled with junk. It's filled with the same stuff that you can buy from the fast fashion retailers that people have just gotten rid of. When I worked at Salvation Army, I originally started working in their warehouse in Conway. It's on 16th Avenue. It was this huge 20,000 square foot warehouse where you sorted all the clothes, which is pretty much my dream come true, is to dig through clothing. But what happened is anytime that something got sorted or didn't sell, it came back to that warehouse and it got packed into bales. And bales are huge, like 5 feet across, 5 feet high, strapped, tight bales. And what they're doing with these bales is they're shipping them to the global south. They're shipping them back to the same underdeveloped countries that we use to make the fabric because they had poor environmental regulations. We're shipping them back to the same countries that made the clothes. And companies do this normally under the guise of like charity or recycling, while in reality much of the clothing is too low quality to use. So it sits in landfills and open air dumps, it pollutes the air, the soil, and the groundwater. Some communities try to burn it. In some communities, it's clogging waterways, leading to contaminated water sources. And then you're like, okay, so wait, somebody has to recycle it, right? So there are some people trying to recycle it, but the reality is like less than 15% of the material in clothing can actually be recycled. Much of the synthetic fibers we have today just simply can't be recycled. So where's it going? Fashion companies are already responsible for about 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and that's more than maritime shipping and the aviation combined. Like, it's a ton. So we still add to this. So every second, a garbage truck full of textile waste ends up in a landfill. Nearly 8% of municipal solid waste in the US is textiles, and the average consumer is throwing away 81.5 pounds of clothes a year. And you're not doing it on purpose, right? You're doing it by donating it. You're doing it by giving it back because they said it was going to go to charity, or you were going to get 10% off. When we think of 81.5 pounds, a pair of jeans weighs about a pound. So think about 81 pairs of jeans going in the trash. So now we have all these fossil fuels based polyester, nylon, and other synthetic fabrics that are filling up the landfills. Most of these take between 20 and 200 years to decompose. And while they're decomposing, they're shedding microfibers and microplastics into the waterways. And they were already doing that while you were wearing them. So when you were washing them in your home washing machine, they were shedding these microplastics. While you were wearing them on your body, they were shedding those into your airway. In the last 30 years, we've allowed the fashion industry to make clothes disposable. So gone are the days when you needed, you wanted to mend your socks, or hem your own pants, or redesign your mom's old dress into something modern. You've been programmed to just go out and buy something new because it's cheap, and because you can, right? You can find it everywhere. The fast fashion market worldwide is estimated to be worth over $106 billion. They've gotten there in 30 years by cutting every corner: labor, regulations, policies, taxes, materials. Today, you can still offshore your manufacturing without any permits, any licenses, any approvals. You want to make something? You can call up the factory in India right now and say, hey, I got this design, will you make it? And they say, how much money do you have? And you tell them how much money you have, and they say, sure. And they're gonna make it for you. Fast fashion is cheap because it's harming the environment. Fast fashion is cheap because someone didn't get paid a living wage. Fast fashion is cheap because someone suffered in unsafe working conditions. Fast fashion is cheap because it's trash. So I have some garments to share with you. I think I bought enough you can share them around the room. I want you to take a look, and if you don't get a garment in your hand right away, I want you to look at your own clothes. Almost everyone, if you reach down into your clothes, you have a fabric content tag in there. What's your clothes made out of? Where are they made? Does it say anything on the label about who made your clothes or how to contact that company? And see what kind of difference is.
Sorry, we're not done yet. Just to let everybody know what the plan is from this point out, we're going to be touching the fabrics, and we have about 20 to 25 minutes for Q&A for Erin. I have a lot of questions. I bet you guys have a lot of questions too. So, actually, I'm probably going to start passing those clothes out. And then I'm going to have Erin come back and open this up for Q&A. Okay, if you're here for sustainability, don't leave yet, and you'll need to check in with your teacher. Okay, so what I'd like to do, we're going to field her questions. So I'm going to have Erin field her own questions. So please stand up, and I know we're kind of having some excitement right now, but we're going to kind of take it back down a notch and just have a little bit more questions and less talking amongst yourselves.
All right, so if you've got a piece of clothing that I passed out, so I've labeled on the inside what the clothes are. If they're sustainable, if they're fast fashion, while they're sustainable, if they are. So there's some cool stuff. There's some American-made clothes being passed around. There's some true trash fast fashion being passed around. But while we look at those things and you're looking at your own things, let's talk about what we can do, right? Because that's the question. It's like, what do we do now that all of our clothes are literally fast fashion? The number one answer to that is to wear the clothes you already have. You don't need new clothes for everything. And this is really hard for me as someone who both sells clothes and loves to buy clothes. Like, I love clothing. I want to buy more clothing. Mend the clothes you have. It's not hard to learn how to sew on a button, how to fix your jeans, how to throw a patch on something to keep it and prolong it. Start looking at those labels when you buy clothes. You want to look for more natural material clothing because that clothing is going to last you longer. It's going to age better. And once it makes it to the landfill, it's going to take less time to decompose because it's a natural fabric. Natural fabrics also feel better, right? Like, we all know the difference between wearing a polyester shirt and a 100% cotton shirt. The 100% cotton shirt, after a few wears, feels fantastic, right? It becomes your favorite t-shirt. Start buying clothing that holds its value. And this is something I tell women especially. A lot of women really need a special occasion outfit, right? They're going to a dance, they're going to a wedding. You can buy a higher end dress, and obviously this is based on the privilege of if you can afford a higher end dress. You can buy a higher end dress that'll hold its value and resell the dress. Then you're still getting that same amount of value out of it, but you're also recouping the cost and putting it back into circulation. Buy clothing from slow fashion and sustainable brands. This is a hard one, right? Like, how do we know anymore? I went through my own closet, as you can see, as you're touching some of my clothes. None of the fast fashion is mine, okay? I bought that from Goodwill yesterday. One thing I noticed today when I was going through my own closet is getting on these brands' websites, right? So a lot of us love to shop online. We're getting on that brand's website, scroll to the bottom and find like the About section. And most companies right now, because greenwashing is very cool, will tell you what they're doing. Like, if they're super proud of the fact that they're using sustainable materials, they're going to tell you about it. You want to go and find those people. The other thing is, if you have a favorite brand, start asking that brand to reshore their manufacturing. There's a huge movement, especially in the Southeast right now, for reshoring. The Piedmont areas of North and South Carolina used to hold a lot of manufacturing facilities, and they're slowly trying to bring those facilities back and open up those factories again. So reach out to favorite brands and be like, hey, I'd love for you to bring back things and make them in America. Anybody else got any ideas? Because I don't know what else to do. Questions? Yeah.
Do you think that consuming fast fashion is particularly an American problem?
No. We do love to shop though. But a lot of our fast fashion retailers are from Europe. Zara's from Europe, H&M's from Europe, Primark. There's a lot of bigger brands that are in Europe that just migrated to America. Our biggest issue, I feel like, in America started when we stopped making our own. So we have so many cool American brands, right? But we no longer manufacture those in the United States. So we now consume not only other people's fashion brands, but all the fashion that comes in.
When a label says made in the United States from imported fabric, what is that actually saying?
Okay, so there are label laws in the United States. Basically, in order to claim that your product is made in America, you have to be able to prove that your product was made in America. And there are hefty fines that are leveraged if you are buying on that label. You can still say on your label, technically that label should say where the product of origin came from. So it should say, like on my dresses, it says made in the USA from Indian textiles, because I import this fabric from India. If it just says made in the United States and also has fabric on there, then you can rightly assume that that fabric was also from the United States. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it was milled in the United States. It means they bought it from a company who sold it in the United States. But it is true. They aren't lying. And if you do think they are, there's a company that was making like these American flag mugs and a matching t-shirt line, and they claimed that their products were made in America, and they got, I think they got fined for over $1 million.
We just saw a top that went by that said it was from a fair trade, it's a slow fashion, fair trade factory in China.
Yeah, so that brand is Fashion Brand Company. And if any of you like weird fashion, please get on the Fashion Brand Company Instagram page or their website, because these people are hilarious and they make some really cool, weird things. But her name's Penelope, the lady who owns it, and she actually went to China and started her own factory that is owned by her brand. She controls their wages, she's the employer of those employees, and she claims to pay them a fair wage. She also keeps her batches really small, so that's important in clothing, right? Is to avoid that fast fashion crossover, we really only want to be looking at pieces that are under 500 units of clothing. Which, how do we know that? That's why we shop smaller brands. But yeah, fast fashion brand, or fashion brand.
So if you're making your own clothes and you go to the fabric store and you buy fabric, how do you know there's not the same issue with the manufacturing of that fabric?
It's tricky. So currently, the US and China, or no, the US, China, and India make up almost all, we grow all of the world's cotton. Milled cotton, over 50% of it comes from China and India. It's all over. When you import fabric, like I import this directly from India, from a guy. I know nothing beyond that. I don't know who made this. I don't know where it was made. Supply chain issues, when not documented, are very problematic. Super problematic. That's even a problem, and this is not a popular opinion, but when something says like organic cotton, we have no way to properly know if that's truly organic cotton. Like that could be some dude who handed another dude $20 at the farm and was like, this is organic cotton. And the guy was like, this is organic cotton. And like, no, it's organic cotton. So mills are hard. You can find American milled materials. That's a thing. They're very expensive. They're not going to be what you find at Joann's. And really, you can order a lot cheaper fun stuff on the internet. No coupon. Anybody else?
What audience would you say this is like most directed towards? Would you say like teens and adults? Who is like as legit?
I think everybody. I think maybe not necessarily older people, because I think a lot of the older generation did grow up wearing their clothes longer. But I mean, I even know my granny loves to stop into Hammers. Hammers is full. You know, she's got her Kohl's cash in her hand, walking around seeing what she can buy with it. Our other issue is social media, right? Like all over TikTok and Instagram, we see people with haul videos. Like, why do we love to watch people show us what they want? It's so entertaining. But it really has added to the issue. But I think it's a multi-generational issue. It's hard to buy even your little kids. Like, why would you buy expensive clothes for your babies? Right, they're gonna outgrow them. Parents love to buy cheap clothes. Anyone else? Yeah.
What favorite vintage stores and like thrift stores would you recommend?
So my favorite thrift store around here is in Georgetown. The Georgetown Goodwill is fantastic. The Little River Goodwill, also really good. I shop online a lot still. I love the Real Real. The Real Real has designer goods, right? I buy a ton of stuff from the Real Real. The place is amazing. You can also sell it back to them, or basically send it back and they resell it for you. I've sold about 12,000 items on Poshmark. Lots in Poshmark. So basically, anywhere, but locally, I go to Goodwill's.
Does ThredUp do anything like nefarious in terms of like when you
ThredUp
return the
sucks.
clothes, they don't throw them away, like they just put them back on the shelf and they're available, like, or is that not a guarantee?
So, like, I think ThredUp sucks. They're not reselling clothes for what the appropriate value often is, right? So you're getting on there and their clothing that they're reselling is often overpriced.
Mhm.
You're paying too much for an Old Navy or a Erin or something like that. But one cool thing that they do that I've actually ordered from them is they have, I think they call them rescue boxes or rehab boxes. And basically, the ones I've got, you can buy poundage of certain materials. So you can buy 10 pounds of denim. I bought 10 pounds of like random material. And when it showed up at my house, I pulled it out and there was like a wedding dress, a prom dress. Like it wasn't, I was thinking it was going to be a box of fabric. But it was clothes that they couldn't sell that had a lot of fabric to them. That was in there. But I don't know what they're doing in directions. I've never seen someone, so I used to be really active in the reseller community. That's why I sold a lot of my and so I have a lot of friends who buy overages from big brands, right? Rent the Runway is one of those that every time you send back something that's got a stain or that you've ripped when you wore it to a wedding, they're packaging all that aside and they're selling it by the Gaylord giant box to resellers who are then going to try to fix it or they're going to sell it to you flawed. But I've never seen a program like that from ThredUp, besides those boxes.
What do you think it'll take for like a mindset of buying like fast fashion? Like what do you think it will take for all of this to change?
I think we're beyond that, right? I think we just have to start making small personal decisions. Like companies decided this for us nearly 40 years ago, right? They were like, we're not going to pay these workers more than $3. And we've seen that basically across all industries, right? At that same time, we didn't just lose clothing manufacturers. In the 80s and 90s, my mom was from Gastonia, North Carolina. And the options when she graduated high school were you went to work in the mill or you went to college. That was it. Those were your two. But that mill job was a good job. Like you were going to move up through the ranks, you would have a retirement. That was considered a good job. We lost all those jobs. So our mentality around fast fashion not only applies to just fashion, it applies to food. We see it, all over the spectrum. I don't know what the answer is besides making small steps for ourselves. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on stores like TJ Maxx and Marshalls and all that?
Fun, huh? Right? The makeup section is the best. So back in the day, TJ Maxx and Marshalls actually had designer overruns. So when those things didn't get sold in the big brand stores, the name brand stores, that overages actually went to TJ Maxx. Now when you go into TJ Maxx, those brands are frequently manufactured, boutique style brands for TJ Maxx and Marshalls. So they've become fast fashion within themselves. They couldn't stock their stores any longer with the overage products. So they had to fill in the gaps. They're just that. Sometimes when you're in there though, you can find Zara. I've seen a lot of Zara in there lately. H&M. It's just trickling down. It's like how bad is Zara if they couldn't sell it themselves and it's now at TJ Maxx? Yes.
All the people in this room now are aware of the problem. Some of them were not aware when they came into the room, so they can be the change.
That's true.
As many people can
That's true.
change how they shop, can change what they buy, and can redo how they do things.
And how many of you now think that you're wearing fast fashion? We all are. Except for me. My undies might be fast fashion. They might be now that I think about it. They're Everlane. Everlane's kind of on the cusp though, right? If you looked at some of those garments, when we see like sustainability, slow fashion, ethically made, good supply chain. We're getting like chunks of pieces. That's okay, right? Like we like sustainable goods. Sustainable doesn't always mean slow.
Is it considered fast fashion if it was fast fashion and you thrifted it?
See, I don't think so, right? Because you're continuing it.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking.
My issue with that is then like, so what if you're out and somebody's like, oh my God, where'd you get that top? And you have to be like, it's Forever 21. That's true. That's true. You can hand it off for the town. Yeah.
Okay, so, we gotta have a solution, right? Right. I don't agree that it's too late. So, at some point, students who are invested in sustainability and invested in the practices that are going to make the community better, what else could they do? If they're looking for a better solution, clothing
something
swaps
else you can
or
do-
boutique, like pop-up boutiques where we do clothing exchanges.
Clothing exchanges are amazing. One thing that we've seen a lot of progress with within fashion retailers that we already love is asking them about their supply chains. And this often forces companies to relook at their own supply chain because they're like, oh no, we've been found out, right? Like we might want to get on the sustainability bus and at least show up in some way. And we see that happening a lot now. And some of it is greenwashing. There's a really famous, now I'm going to forget her name, sustainability lady, and she's currently partnering with H&M to create a line, and everybody's like, no, like, it doesn't cross over, it's just greenwashing. But encouraging, switching clothes, those are all great things.
How would you classify in this like continuum of fast fashion and slow fashion something like Pendleton, where they're like milling and growing the wool in the U.S., but because of the cost of labor, they're shipping it all across the world to sew it?
It's hard, right? It's a great company. They make great products. They make long-lasting products, but they're still utilizing underpaid labor. But that's not to say that all factories are underpaying their workers. There are factories in the world that are trying to pay a living wage, that are doing good work. It's just not most of them currently. So it's hard. You could ask them, send Pendleton an email and say, I'd like to see you reshore your manufacturing. There's plenty of mills that are available that can open up their cut and sew factories right around the mills that would save them shipping all of that product overseas. Apparently not going to save them that much because they're not willing to do it. We can still ask them. I mean, I'd love to see Pendleton made in America. Yeah.
Is there like a one place you can go to look and say, oh, look, it's made in America, everything about it's American?
So, I don't think I have it written. Eric, can I have my phone, please? So I follow this one girl on Twitter that I love, and she's a Black creator, and she is a stylist, and she has made a list, and it's a living, breathing list. She adds to it all the time. It's $2, and I always recommend that you support people who are doing this work, because they're important, right? Let me find her name. I'm going to find her on the X. Terrible. Her name's Lakin. Let me find her. But she has this awesome list. OGLAKYN on Twitter. I'm not going to call it.
Does she have Instagram too?
I follow her on Instagram. One of my favorite Instagram followers, though, is Closed Horse Podcast.
What was that again, Erin? The OG?
OGLAKYN.
Who holds the greater ethical burden? The companies that are not paying the livable wage or the foreign governments that are having the standards lowered.
So sometimes I wonder if those countries only need those regulations because of what we are burdening them with, right? Like, would they even need tougher environmental regulations if we weren't there to have them make clothes?
It's like, for example, I grew up in Thailand where the living wage is $3 a day.
Yeah.
And a huge part of Thailand's GDP is these foreign companies that come in and are investing in the country. And if the government raise the wage to that of the U.S.,
Yeah.
these companies would pull out, and
The economy.
that's a lot of money that
Yeah.
Thailand wouldn't have anymore.
Yeah.
So where's the compromise? Like, what's the solution?
Paying better wages, forcing an international living wage, even an international minimum wage. I mean, the issue, like when we think about Bangladesh, right, them only getting $100 a month, their cost of living is pretty low, right, compared to ours. That's still a super low amount for them to get paid. I think we're all a little responsible for paying people what they're worth.
What would you say is like the average age of the people working in these textile like industries, especially in developing countries?
That's a great question. Let's ask Google. I don't know. I mean, people of all ages are obviously working in factories. There are some reports, obviously, that we've all seen about child labor. A lot of that is hidden and done via like investigative reporting. When you look at clothing and you do see that people have clear supply chains, a lot of that clear supply chain is acknowledging that they're hiring third-party investigators to go into the companies, the manufacturing centers that they work with to inspect those factories. And they do pay that third party, which gets risky, right? You're paying someone to report positively for your company. But there are some certifications that go through to ensure there's not child labor. But essentially, if you start a working age at what, 14 maybe, 15 if you're not receiving an education, and go into factory work, and you're hunched over a sewing machine until you can't anymore, until your body physically can't, you're looking at 45 years in a sewing machine factory. Thank you all for letting me come and talk. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Erin. You did a fantastic job. Just as a reminder, I realize we didn't solve a lot of the world's problems here, but I think we got a really good handle on at least what the problem is and what we can do about it. And that probably involves buying less new stuff and buying and at least recycling what we have and trying to buy from places that are doing more sustainable work. One of the goals here that we have at the Jackson Center is that we haven't done our job if you have not shared what you learned here with somebody else. So make sure that when you leave today, you make a new friend or that you share with somebody where you were tonight and tell them what you learned and have them check their labels. So thanks again for coming. We'll be having another event in about 2 weeks on artificial intelligence, so keep an eye out for that. And y'all have a fantastic day. Thank you for your participation.